Are you a Marxist now? You say you are, but I wonder what sort of a Marxist, because let's add in the other thing that IS believed, that they still believed in the idea that the working class were going to be the agent which overthrew the capitalist state, and part of the project of IS was not simply theoretical, but members of IS were actively expected to go out and to raise the consciousness of the workers so they would overthrow the state.
Yeah, well, you and I, Professor Ted, can sit around rehashing glory days of the 60s and old picket lines and struggles and this kind. And there's no shame in it. I mean, unlike a lot of people who wouldn't do the 60s again, or not in the same way, who've turned into self-haters and sort of think the whole thing was a waste of time. I don't think that at all. I wish I'd done some of it differently and better. But most of all, I wish I'd done a bit more about the things that were going on at that time. I wouldn't unlive it, in other words. So yeah, we can do that. And we do, if we're given half a chance. But you can't lie to the young. You must not bullshit the young. It's an absolute principle. And these people were asking me questions, seriously, what should I do with my life? Should I commit to this or not? And I reviewed it, and I said, is there now an international working class movement linked at the point of production, internationalist, that could replace capitalism, as was once thought possible? No, there isn't. Is it in long-term decline, that idea? Yes. Is it coming back? I don't think so. Is there an ideology, at least, even without an anchorage in a material class movement, that could at least say it was the critique of capitalism that could transcend it? Not known to me, no. And the ones I've seen on offer, not very persuasive. At that point, it seemed meaningless to go on calling myself a socialist. I'd been doing it by that stage, if you're still saying it, you're doing it out of almost manneristic promptings, so as you don't get confused with just being another liberal. And it could be just that you can't bear to let go of something that used to mean a lot to you. And I'm so against sentimental attachments of that kind.
But liberal has become a cleaner, nicer word for you now.
Not to me.
Hasn't it? Because you're one or two references.
I mean, I still find the word liberal very smug and disappointing. And I think I quote the late Conor Cruise O'Brien, who had a lot of arguments saying liberalism makes the rich world yawn and the poor world sick. That wouldn't be a complete description of it now, but I can remember how true that was at a certain point. But thinking like a Marxist, in other words, seeing how the materialist conception of history does actually work, as explaining human motivation, as well as a lot of developments in the material sphere, banishing the ideas of the supernatural and the superstitious axiomatically, telling people that their emancipation is not going to be delivered to them. There's no redemption, there's no salvation. It has to be your own act of freeing yourself. All this is very useful.
I can see why you don't want to embrace the word liberal, and understand why the word socialist is something that you now don't want to hang on to. Do you feel when you read the word the left, or left-wingers, or those on the left, do you know, is that now something which prompts a feeling of, well, not contempt, but a feeling of irritation, a feeling of annoyance? You don't feel of the left any longer?
Not really, no. They don't really allow it. I mean, when I took the view that the Saddam Hussein regime should no longer be allowed the private ownership of Iraq and its people and its resources, there was what you could call a rather small, and not unlike the old international socialist tendency, but small, scattered, but interesting group of people in Iraq who thought that way, especially among Iraqi Kurds, but not exclusively. Intellectuals, Trotskyists like Kenan Makia. And in other countries around the world, people thought, yes, obviously, no one on the left could possibly support any policy that presumed the survival of that regime. But by then you were beginning to scrabble a bit to keep that idea of the left going. I mean, if the majority of the left in the world, and actually the majority of liberals too, decides that they think Bush is a greater enemy than Saddam Hussein, well, that's what the left now thinks. Well, they can leave me out of that completely. I mean, I won't quarrel at that point. I'd rather be called a neoconservative at that stage.
Let's deal for a moment, forgive me for being crass, but
Yeah.
people who have tried to explain your arguments about Iraq have said, you've been divorced from your roots, you've fallen in with some strange friends, you've made a great deal of money, you've lost contact. And I can remember there's a nice little, I think it was a quote, I think it was Salman Rushdie, who you very vigorously defended during the fatwa. He used the phrase that you become aligned with people that you're not like.
Well, that wouldn't be for the first time, if it was true. And I've been, obscenely rich for much longer than that, anyway. Make enough money to take any political position I want. If anyone wants to attribute it to... Now, that really would be vulgar Marxism, by the way.
Yes.
Well, Kanan Makir, the author of The Republic of Fear, which is the best analysis of the Saddam regime from class viewpoint, ideological viewpoint, analytical viewpoint, is exactly a brother of yours and mine from the 1960s left opposition. He was one of the best products of it. And it was his book, plus one or two others, that really laid out the case for regime change in Iran. If you're going to take sides in an argument that involves state power and diplomacy and war, well, then it doesn't matter whether you're me or Salman or Michael Moore or Harold Pinter. You're going to find that you're on your side or in your camp are people who you're not like. I mean, the Iraq War was opposed by His Holiness the Pope, by His Grace the Archbishop of Canterbury, by Vladimir Putin, by people whose names are almost too leprous to mention, Gerhard Schroeder, Jacques Chirac, professional political pimps of the lowest order. George Galloway, someone who managed to be both a pimp for and a prostitute of Saddam Hussein in the same cycle. I mean, I don't judge Salman's view by that. But I would put Paul Wolfowitz or Kanan Makir against any of the above mentioned, or Kofi Annan and his rackety, bought-out, oil-for-food, rotted United Nations. Easily and any day, and give reasons, as I do in the book, why that's true. These are people of real principle, opposed to the most, I think, the most appalling collection of opportunists and thugs it's possible to imagine. And I only mention the most celebrated public figures. I mean, behind that was something even more sinister that certainly Salman should have been able to see through, which is an alliance on the street between what's left of the hard left, rather thuggish elements of the Socialist Workers' Party and the remains of the CP, the Communist Party, and the Muslim Brotherhood, openly allied against Western democracy for reasons that are too obvious to go into, though I don't mind going into them.